Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng Peng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. You can also find my work at NBC Sharks on Twitter, Sheng_Peng, and Blue Sky, Sheng Peng.
I'm Keegan McNally. You can find me on Twitter at halfwall_hockey, my website half-wallhockey.com, or at San Jose Hockey Now. This week, it's a mailbag.
Oh, no.
It's another mailbag. Two things. One, why don't you talk about our sponsor, and then I'll talk about the gimmick that I'm going to do in the background here.
Yes, because we have an exciting running gag with our mailbag. But before we get to that, though, let's talk about our sponsor, Bring Hockey Back, bringhockeyback.net. They do amazing T-shirts, hilarious T-shirts. They also do custom hockey jerseys. That's a big part of it. So if there's any hockey jerseys that you guys are looking for your team, any size for any occasion, go to Bring Hockey Back, bringhockeyback.net for your hockey jerseys. But in terms of their T-shirts, they have a couple of cool Sharks ones up right now. There you go. You can see it right there. So they have a Macklin Celebrini shirt on a ATV, just like he tried to kill Sharky earlier this season. And a Director of Vibes T-shirt too, which a lot of you guys have. You guys know and love. And coupon code San Jose Hockey Now for 15% off. So Bring Hockey Back, bringhockeyback.net. The coolest T-shirts, the best custom hockey jerseys. Bring Hockey Back.
Love it. I have in the background on another monitor behind my monitor, I have just started while you were talking the Lord of the Rings Return of the King extended edition, which we're not going to tell you how long that is.
We're not
just yet. But if we surpass the Lord of the Rings Return of the King extended edition, I don't know. I think we get a medal.
I'm going to throw myself into Mount Doom. So I'm
going to throw it. Yes, we're going to throw Shang into the fires of Mount Doom.
Well, you're going to throw. I'm going to throw myself off of it.
He's going to do it himself. Yeah, it's like when Smeagol has to bite the finger off and he just falls back.
Exactly. So we're going to pepper the entire podcast, I guess, with Return of the King references. So I just looked up one to make sure. So
because it's in the background.
No man can kill me. I am no man.
I am no man.
Which actually was basically said in the book, which I forgot. So it seemed kind of corny when I watched it, but reviewing because I had read the book, but it was a long time since I read the book, and it is actually in the book, not in that kind of clipped and chopped form, but it is in the book though.
Yeah. So periodically through the episode, I will update you all on where we are at in the story. As of now, Smeagol just found the ring in the water. So
okay, so just they're going to flashback. So this is the flashback. So this is where we present the background, the prologue of this podcast. And a lot's mailbag, you guys might remember, went past 4 hours, right? I think it was like 4:02 or something like that, right?
We might make it. All right. In an effort to not get past the Lord of the Rings Extended Edition, we're going to start. You ready?
Yes.
We have our first question from Falco5, who asks, "What stats or measurables can you use to find winning players? Some of it's attitude and leadership. However, most people can't watch every game of every team. So, what can be observed by watching games?" Okay.
So
it's a toughie.
It's a good question though, and I think it's a question that the entire hockey world is trying to figure out and still hasn't figured out, because how do you measure that last kind of bit of will to do something, to make a play? And some people will say, well, how about blocking shots, because you're throwing your body on the line? But as we learned in analytics, right, the last decade, that the team that blocks the most shots, a lot of times they're the ones that are being shelled, as we've seen with the Sharks. Mm-hmm. So blocking a lot of shots, yes, it is a sign of, it's not all bad either. I think there's been too much of a reversal against blocking shots, too much negativity associated with it, because there is still a lot of, it just takes a lot of cojones to do it. Mm-hmm. So guys deserve credit for doing that. But if you are leading the league in block shots, if you are leading as a team or an individual, then that might be a sign that you're just being shelled, of course. Another stat that I've thought about that, and I thought maybe this is a stat that could be a good barometer of it, but looking harder at it, and it's a more recent stat too, so I think this one's interesting to bring up, is puck battles. And puck battles that we see, it's not readily available, but it is a micro stat that Stackleets who I work with, Sport Logic, you've seen them from them, and other third-party stat companies have provided, right?
Mm-hmm.
And puck battles, though, is interesting, though, because one thing that I found looking at it harder this year, and this goes back to a Will Smith article that I wrote a couple months ago about Will Smith and what was behind his improvement and in the second half of the season. And one of the most interesting stats that I found, if you guys recall the article, or if you haven't read it, go read it, is that Will, in the second half of the season, he got away from getting stuck in puck battles.
Yep.
Because what Will was doing the first half of the season was he was in puck battles, but he kept losing them because he's 19. His body he's a college student, basically, playing a man's game. And so the second half of the season, he kind of he got into, I think by rate, almost 50% less puck battles, maybe 40% less puck battles. So a significant amount less. And when I say that at first to maybe an old school hockey person, they'll be like, "Oh, what a weenie. He's avoiding the contact or whatever," right? Well, when you look at Stackleets, this is something that I had available that I put into the article. Stackleets, the top 10 least puck battle heavy forwards, right? Or the forwards that engage in the least puck battles in the league.
Yeah.
Patrick Kane is there. Tyler Toffoli is there. And Patrick Kane is a great instructive example because, of course, that's one of Will Smith's favorite players. And Patrick is smart enough to know, and slippery enough, too, to avoid not getting into puck battles. And that's been throughout his entire career. And a guy like Tyler Toffoli, too, is a good example. Tyler Toffoli is stronger than Patrick Kane, but Tyler Toffoli is not necessarily, he's not Marcus Foligno, or he's not built like a Mack truck, no pun intended. He's not a guy that necessarily that's his forte. And so if you avoid it, stay on the edges, and then wait for the puck to come to you and then do something with it, there's a value in that too. So that's not a perfect measure too. Now you want guys who are good with puck battles on your team, but
sure,
you don't need 18 guys to do it, though, is I think the point. And Falco, I think your question is trying to get at a stat that is kind of a catch-all, not a catch-all, not like WAR in baseball, but a stat that maybe signifies the best that, hey, you want 18 of these guys on your team, basically, or in your lineup on a given night. And that just isn't there yet. I think that is sort of what everybody's looking for. And maybe it will be found in the micro stats because that is not as public, and there's still things that are not measured. As far as I know, on micro stats, I love, like, I'll give you an example of a stat that I really love that I haven't really seen measured. Guys who can clear the puck from the defensive zone without icing it. And there's an art to that. And a guy that I think is good at it, that you guys will laugh because I'm trying to pimp the guys that you guys hate. But Barclay Goodrow actually, I think, is good at that. And there are guys I've seen that I think are better at that than other people. And that is a verifiable
skill.
It's useful to the team too, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's something that's not the perfect example, but my point is that there are micro stats that aren't measured either. And so maybe we'll find that. Maybe it'll be in like a player's speed in a micro area from the blue line to the dot. Yeah. And when we look at that, a lot of teams win if you have a lot of guys who are particularly fast in that small area, right? Something like that. I'm just kind of making that up off the top of my head. But anyway, so that's the best answer I have. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's really tough because, like, you could pick things out that you think are good indicators. Like, this guy gets the puck through traffic to the net from the point more than this guy. And you'd be like, okay, great. But then the guy who just doesn't shoot it from the point as often and like activates down low and creates a cross ice pass instead, maybe he's more effective. So it's like there's different ways to interpret the game. And as of now, nobody's really put all together to be like, that's the hockey player that I want. You can get this eye test feeling of what a winning player is. And that's like something that scouts either are good or bad, or maybe even they're not good or bad at it, but like they're like, that looks like an NHL hockey player, or like that looks like an NHLer. And it's kind of this weird feeling that you get. That is, that's it. It's a feeling, and they're wrong or they're right, but it's the eye test, and that's not a stat or a measurable, which kind of sucks.
And maybe it is not that how do you say it? Not that magical. Maybe it's just a mix of certain styles. I think that with analytics, like there was the early days of public analytics, there's too much emphasis on, we got to get the guys that drive shot
Shots.
volume, right? Yep. And so I remember names like Sean Bergenheim, players that didn't last, that maybe they were good in this area, but they weren't good at a lot of other things maybe. Yep. And maybe it's just as simple as you need a mix of guys. So you need, if you look at the block, we use Patrick Kane as an example, right? So you need your Patrick Kane. You need your Jonathan Taves, though, who's going to win puck battles a la Macklin Celebrini. On defense, you need your Duncan Keith, your more finesse offensive guy. But also, too, you need your Brett Seabrook to kind of handle some of the defensive load. And if you have two Duncan Keiths and you have two Patrick Kanes and you don't have a Taves and a Seabrook, maybe that's not a winning combo. And maybe that is that simple an answer.
Our first question has made it all the way to the point where they're walking into Isengard and Mary and Pippin are smoking on the wall.
Oh, no, we've gotten out of the flashback. Oh, dear Lord.
Yeah, we've gotten way out of the flashback. All right, next question.
I love the ends part, though. So do not miss me when the Ents get their revenge on Saruman, all right? So that
Gary, too, asks, hi, Sheng and Keegan. Thanks for doing this. Wish both of you the best off season. My question to you, this is where we got a little confused, so we're going to answer both.
Yeah.
Do you guys think any of the 2026 top draft eligible players will be able to make the Sharks roster this fall if drafted? Problem is we're in 2025, not 2026. So if it's about 2025 and which ones could make the Sharks, I think we have an answer there.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about 2026 as well. But the first part of it, in 2026, it's really, 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 really early. So I think Gavin McKenna is the obvious answer because he has already surpassed most players' draft year production and in his draft -1 production.
And what you're saying is that Gavin McKenna could play in the NHL in the fall of October 2025.
I don't think he would do amazing, but I'm sure he could play. He's not like he's still too tiny to really give it a go. I think because he'd be like he's 16 now, so like that's hard. But he is skilled enough for sure.
Don't get involved in puck battles, Gavin.
That's exactly. Run away with the puck. Go somewhere else. Yeah, don't get involved in puck battles. Go somewhere else.
Flee like Mary and Pippin when there are a lot of orcs around, right?
Yeah, flee. 2025 is an interesting question because there's a few that could, I think. Especially if you're asking if they're going to make the Sharks roster, which is one of the worst rosters in the NHL. I think it's possible. Schaefer, Misa.
Do you think any of them will play 82 games or stay on the Sharks? I mean, the whole season.
I think it's if you're asking, would be able to.
Yeah.
Or
will.
Will. No. I don't think Will is very likely to either one.
Okay.
If they got Schaefer or Misa. But could, I think both could, because the Sharks have a horrible defense and it would be trial by fire and you'd have to sit him a lot because he'd go from playing 25 games last year to playing a lot more in the NHL at a higher level. But Schaefer has a lot of ability that the Sharks defense doesn't. So I think if you sheltered him, if this is the plan you wanted, rather than just sending him back to juniors, which would probably be the better plan, you could do it.
Okay. You can give him the Will Smith plan.
Yeah, like third pairing, and then sit him a lot.
Give him a lot of power play, or at least second unit power play.
And see if that works. Because he does. He's very smart. He's great in transition. I think he would do well in certain rushes with Celebrini and Smith and stuff. So that'd be fun to see. And he's not terrible defensively at all. So he'd have to learn a lot in a short period of time. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's going to be hard though. Because if he does show out and say the Sharks somehow got him, you're looking at the guy that has more offensive talent than the rest of your roster on defense. So by a long shot, no more Wallman here either or anything. So Misa, I think, has a game that can play in a bottom six right now. So if you wanted to, I think you could.
You think he's strong enough? Because that's always the question. That's what I knew about Macklin, or that's what I saw in Macklin, that he's was strong. Dumbing guys in development camp, and then I was like, okay. And then he was dumbing guys in rookie face-off. And it's like, okay. And then he was doing an exhibition. That's when you kind of need like, okay, exhibition is basically AHL level. And he is physically at times dominating guys at basically the AHL level, guys who are bigger and older than him. And so that's when he figured the strength part wouldn't be an issue in the NHL because again, you just extrapolate the exhibition to NHL. And so with Misa, that's the part I always wonder about with the 18-year-old, if that part is ready for that.
Yeah. I mean, Smith wasn't the most developed, and he made it. So
right, true.
So I don't know. And Misa has a lot of wheels, like a lot more speed than Smith does. And I mean, I think Celebrini probably has maybe a touch more speed, but it's tough. They're probably very comparable. Okay. So I think he could get out of situations a lot easier, just because he's fast. So whereas Smith kind of had to lag and has to hold onto the puck sometimes, and like he has to play that style, so he's got to be physically ready to take hits more.
Okay,
it feels like. But
I guess the more interesting question that we will answer later because someone asked is, what is better for Misa's development? So we'll get to that later then.
All right. James R says, Havelid, basically, does Havelid sign as ELC? Does he appear destined for the Barracuda next season? And does Greer see an NHL future with Mattias Havelid?
Yeah.
I think you could argue that if they signed an ELC, somewhere it would be unlikely for an NHL GM to not see an NHL future, at least a possibility of one.
Right.
And, so, yes, but do we see one? I don't know.
I don't think it's likely looking at his track. I actually I asked someone about Havelid a month ago or so. So I'm trying to look back on that a little bit. But you had some thoughts on his season, just his course, right? Where he kind of struggled in the SHL and then he found his game, but it was in the Allsvenskan. And he's 21. If he was 18, then you'd be thrilled by that. But 21, you're not as right.
He's a guy that this happened when he was in his draft year. He found himself into a really good system where they can use him as the primary puck mover in a certain situation on power play time and stuff like that. And he can put up some points and he can actually look effective. The problem is when you take him out of those specific situations, he doesn't look effective at all. And he makes a lot of defensive gaffes and isn't the biggest guy, isn't the fastest guy either, and isn't there's just not a lot of deception to his offensive game that you're really pushing play at 5-on-5 with him. So it's kind of you're in this mixed bag of a couple of tools that are good, but a lot of it doesn't round out too much. And that's why he had basically middling stats and just didn't do a whole lot in the SHL for a couple of years now. And honestly, if he didn't go to the Allsvenskan and have a pretty good year, he might not be signed to an ELC. So I'm cautious. I think the Barracuda need more of him on that right side of the defense. But I think there are other defenders that have moved ahead of him that the Sharks have drafted since. And it's been 3 years.
Sometimes two guys sort of do better in the AHL than in the Europe. The ice, the smaller ice actually is better for some players. I feel like Beasted's a guy that actually has adjusted okay, and he's been more productive in the AHL generally than he was in the SHL. But I am with you with Havelid. That's a little bit of a long shot, but you wouldn't give a guy an ELC if you didn't think that there was a smidgen of a decent, or not decent, but a reasonable chance.
Yeah.
I did want to add too that you guys might hear me sniffling throughout the podcast, a little bit like Frodo. I'm playing hurt, so I had a sore throat a couple of days ago. I have the sniffles, so just so you guys know, if you hear that's me doing that, me being dramatic. But anyway, one thing that someone did mention to me a couple months ago in regards to Havelid, though, is that he is healthy now, and so I don't know if he was as healthy earlier this season or last season, and I wasn't exactly sure what that was referencing, but that seemed to be a big deal to this person. And so maybe that helps. And I think too that I would guess he would come over. You guys might be aware of there's an agreement between the NHL, SHL, just generally speaking. I don't want to go into the whole details of it, but unless you're a first round pick, that generally you will stay in the SHL to develop unless your team releases you. And there are some exceptions to the rule, obviously. I think actually Elias Pettersson, the other one, the defenseman, is an example of that. But anyway, in this case, this might be a case of the Sharks sort of, obviously, Havelid's development in SHL has not been as linear going upward trending upward as you'd like. And so this is a chance to sort of maybe take control of his development and to some degree salvage him.
Yeah. And again, the Barracuda could use that. So that's also a benefit too. It's like it's a position of a little bit of need on that right side. So at least somebody who can play offensively. Like you got Thompson and you have Polkamp coming eventually. But there's not a lot otherwise on the right.
Thompson is there now. So Thompson is different. Thompson's a little more developed, but yeah. But to your point though, that AHL, there's so much turnover that there's going to be a chance for him to win a spot.
Yeah, exactly. James R. had another question about what's your guess on whether Pavelski or Couture rejoin the Sharks as development coaches or front office staff?
Yeah, I would say the chances are higher Couture over Pavelski with the Sharks, just because with Pavelski, there's obviously another team that would be buying for his services, and he lives there now. He didn't move back. So, but I think that both teams he would consider, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I think both will return in some kind of role. I think they'd just be too good at it.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
whether you're still in the camp of like, man, these guys still didn't win the Sharks a cup. These guys are not winners or whatever, right? Pavelski and Couture, right? Same, I guess the same, did not win the Sharks a cup. But in terms of, going back to Falco's question, in terms of the things that we can't measure, the stats, right? Both those guys ooze that. And so both those guys are, whatever they want to do, they're going to do well in. I'm just guessing, this is just me freewheeling here. So I'm just going to guess that I see Logan maybe being a little more of a development coach in the end, or being like management type. I don't really see him doing the coaching nitty gritty. I could be wrong about that. I think he said that too in his interview with Frank Saravalli recently, but that's just my feel. Whereas Pavelski, I see like he should be management, or maybe he could be a coach, but management. Like I think like development, that stuff, like he could. I think he'd do anything well, but I don't know why he just looks like management to me. So
I think he goes to like scout, assistant GM kind of role, kind of thing.
Okay,
that's my
assistant GM. Yeah, maybe scout for a couple of years. That's a tough life in terms of the travel, but you only do that for a couple of years, and then you move up. And I think Logan has said that he doesn't want to do this in that same interview with Frank, but that he'd be great on TV if he ever wanted to do it, but I don't think he wants to. So.
All right, we're ripping through it. We just finished an extended edition scene where Legolas outdrinks Gimli because like Gimli.
Oh, I don't know. I've seen that one.
Yeah, Gimli drinks like 20 pints, and Gimli's like just like hammered drunk, and then Legolas is drinking the same amount. At the very end, Legolas goes, "Wait, I feel some tingling in my hand. It's affecting me," because like elves are, immortal and whatever. And just all powerful beings. So, but Gimli's like shithoused and like falling over. Anyway, Brucellus asks, "Hey, Shanky, how crazy of an idea is this? San Jose offers basically nothing to Pittsburgh for Erik Karlsson.
Should the Sharks pay for Erik Karlsson?
Yeah, like should they reacquire Erik Karlsson?
Yeah,
because the Sharks need a offensive defenseman."
And actually, there was one thing that Brucellus joked about that I joked with you. Brucellus asked, "We'll kill our chances for a 2026 lottery pick." And I reminded Keegan, remind you guys, I'll remind you, Brucellus, that Erik tried his best to fuck up the Sharks lottery pick in 2023, and even he couldn't do 100 points in Norris Trophy. So the Sharks lottery pick is probably safe in 2026. Just don't know how safe, how high or low it'll be, but I think there's a good chance they'll land in the lottery. But to answer your overall question of whether or not the Sharks should trade for a Karlsson, I actually think it's more interesting than I think Keegan found it. Karlsson has 2 more years on his contract after this year. So it's almost
Mhm.
expiring. There is game in there still for sure, right? We saw Pittsburgh, we didn't see it enough, right? And we know Kyle Dubas kind of skewered Karlsson end of the season, but we saw the pieces of it at Four Nations. Karlsson was very good there. I don't think it's the craziest idea. I would say that like a lot of players you bring in though, in terms of like their impact on a room and that sort of thing. Not that Karlsson is bad, like, but is he the leader you want around? So like those guys, right, coming up. And I asked that about any player you bring in now because I asked them, well, how will that affect Macklin? How will that affect Will? And
Yeah.
guys like that, and Eklund, and all those kind of guys, right? And not to say that Karlsson would be bad. They could use the skill. I mean, he does check off a lot of boxes. They really need a player like that. I mean, they need all kinds of defense. They could afford him. He's expensive, but they can afford him. They can have him for cheap. I'm sure Pittsburgh would trade him. Well, Pittsburgh may not trade him to San Jose just because of how bad it would look to trade Erik Karlsson back to the Sharks for, let's say, a 4th-round pick.
Yeah.
After all, you dumped to get him in the first place.
It's a bad look. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bad look. But I'm not against the idea, though. I would think about it a little bit. And you have somebody that can play with Macklin and Will in the sense of the high skill player, right? That can help the power play out and to be able to skate with Macklin. And the Sharks lack a lot of players who can do that, obviously. So anyway.
My short answer was no. And
But
long
why
answer is hell no. No, I'm done with that. Like I don't.
Okay.
It's more of an optics and a more of a. We tried this. It wasn't a good thing. It wasn't a good thing. Like there was good parts, but
Yeah.
it was not the thing that the Sharks needed. And unless they paid you to take him back, and then you go, okay, sure, yeah, which would be ultimate. I think Kyle Dubas should just be fired at that point. But like,
well, they basically did though. If you trade a 4th-round pick to the Sharks, they basically paid
Yeah.
you Sam Dickinson and Miguel Brandlin.
Yeah, 2 first-round picks.
For a couple of years of
But
Erik Karlsson renting space elsewhere.
He also he wants to be with a winner. Like he wants to go win.
Yeah, so. I don't think it would happen. That's right, because Erik still has his no trade clause. And I do agree with you that in the sense of what you said, like just the vibes seem off about that.
Yeah,
I guess like if we're measuring everything the Sharks do the last year and in the coming year on pure vibes, the vibes are a little bit off with that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that. Ty Combs says, what were Celebrini and Smith's draft combine interviews with the Sharks like? Which is kind of specific.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Because I remember we saw their interviews after they were drafted to the Sharks at the draft, because both of us were at both of those drafts.
No, but he's talking specifically about the inside, the meetings they had, the dinner they had at that steakhouse in Buffalo. That
we were not there.
Yeah. So yeah, I actually checked in a little bit on it. I didn't get anything back that's really interesting. But if I do get anything back, it's actually a good story to write about around the draft combine. So I will, and I plan on being at the combine too, guys, so look for my coverage there. So it could be a good story for that time. So if I come up with anything, I'll let you know. But I don't know if there's anything that stood out though. Just early returns of I sent out a couple of fillers for, hey, anything stand out on those days that you heard or whatever, right? Did Will Smith like kill a porterhouse like in double the time Mike Greer, and that impressed Mike. And it's like that's the guy you got to draft. That guy is a high compete, son of a bitch, So.
That guy's a winner.
Right.
Okay, so I know that this is not related to the question, but I remember hearing Will Smith's this was before he was drafted by anybody. They had like this whole media availability thing, and we were sitting there in Nashville, and I remember him like just being very direct and answering the questions and looking you in the eye about
this is post combine. This is at the draft, but before the couple of days before the draft, right?
Yes, this was like the media availability, like a day or two before the draft.
Right.
And he seemed very intense and very like focused on being a winner. And I remember that stuck out a bunch. Was like he seemed like a competitive kid, and I talked about that after it was. That interview happened too. He seemed like a very competitive kid.
And yet, Half-wall hockey still drafted Matt
I did.
Michkov.
Also, he didn't say anything.
He just had that aura of
He
not
was
saying
just
anything.
around. Yeah, I did. I drafted Matt Michkov, despite knowing in my heart that the Sharks would draft Mill Smith. But that's why we were all huddled around, me and JD and Victor and a bunch of other draft nerds were all huddled around Will Smith because we were like, Sharks are getting that kid. Anyway, what a good time.
Yeah.
All right.
I one day, just a quick aside, like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I want another Sharks draft board from that year. Because we know Bedard was probably one, but then I've always thought that if they had a number 2 pick, they would have drafted Karlsson, and then Fantilli, the size, right? And then and then Smith at 4.
Yeah.
Smith was ahead of Michkov. I think that's obvious.
So.
And Reinbacher and all that stuff. But anyway, that's a quick aside. That's the future Sharks Easter egg. That'd be really cool to learn. But
yeah, I'd love to know that.
Yeah.
SJShorky has 2 questions, but we're gonna answer the first one. Are there any goalies worth grabbing in the draft this year?
All right, take the page. Late rounds too, right? Middle rounds too. And we're not talking about the top goalie.
So the one that's the top goalie is Joshua Ravensbergen, who's gonna probably just be taken in the first round in the 20s. Okay. I think so. He had a good enough year. He's got the pedigree. He's got all of the athleticism that you're looking for. There's not a huge amount of goalies. And this draft is not very strong in the last 15, 20 picks of the first round. So it's like a recipe for a team like, I don't know, Tampa to be like, we're not Tampa because they don't have a pick, but one of those teams to pick a guy
that needs a goalie in the future, right?
Exactly. Like you're gonna store him for 4 or 5 years and see what happens. I like Jack Ivankovic is a good one. He's probably going to be in like the 2nd, 3rd round. There's some overagers like Dawson Cowan who are pretty decent. And
he was at Sharks development camp this past.
Yeah,
right.
He was.
He had a good year.
He had a good year. Then I think it's Hrebeck is one of the other overagers that had a good year as well. Ben Hrebeck. Good. Yeah, I'd say okay size. He's listed at like 6'3", but looking at him, he looks
not
like
a real 6'3".
No, he looks like 6'1".
Okay.
He's also very skinny, but I like the way he plays. Kind of a scrambly style, and I like that in the goalie. And he'll probably be available in like the 5th or 6th. So yeah, it's just not that many this year. There's a couple of Russian guys too. I think last year was a stronger crop of goalies. And then the year before also had even better goalies. So
quick question for you. So the Sharks have 2 first rounders, 2 seconds, a 3rd, 2 fourths, a 5th.
Damn.
My question to you is, knowing the Shark system as you do, what do you think is the earliest you might go for a goalie? If a guy you really like, that the Ivanovic, right? Ivankovic, sorry. If he falls to like the 4th or the 5th round.
Oh yeah, take him immediately.
So so like maybe the 4th then is like the earliest you might.
Yeah, I think Ivankovic is probably, given the he's probably going to actually end up going in like the 2nd.
Right. I'm just saying in theory though, if a guy falls though, what's the earliest that you would spend a pick on a goalie in this draft, knowing that obviously if Askarov on the way and you're not worried about the future between the pipes at the moment?
Yeah, with the Sharks, I think I would probably spend maybe the second round pick, like if Ivankovic or somehow Ravensbergen or whatever.
Oh, really? You would still use that high pick? Okay.
I think so. It's always good to grab one of these guys because like they also maintain a lot lot of value.
Oh, sure. You never know. Yeah, for sure.
And they're pretty good. I think there's not the like Michael Rabel, Adam Gajan, Jacob Fowler, Damian Clara that there was in the 23 draft or whatever, but like they're still decent goalies.
Okay.
Sharks just don't need one, which is a rarity because most of the years we're like, oh god, who are the Sharks going to draft goalie?
Like last year. Last year they hadn't acquired Askarov yet, so
we were like,
the last couple of years we're all looking hard at goalies every year, and then a couple of years ago you thought that they had moved up to try to draft somebody, but they got beat to him, right? So,
yeah, that was Jacob Fowler, who went 2 picks before the Brandon Svoboda.
Yeah.
So I swear that was for him. Like that's just my gut. but I will one day ask my career or you can ask my career that. Because they needed a goalie and Jacob Fowler, like Boston and all that. And he's a great goalie. God, that was a good draft year. 23 was like, if you're a draft junkie, what a good draft year.
Yeah, we look back on it, just how deep it is, right? Bedard is still the clear number one, but you have even Smith. There were rumblings. I think that might have been more smoke than anything, but that he might go as high as maybe it was Columbus. There was some smoke that
for 2
that
or 3
they liked
or...
him at 3, right? Yeah, Columbus was 3 in that draft, but just that Smith still has a good chance of ending up in that layer even though he was the last guy picked of that layer, but with Fantilli and Karlsson. And Leo obviously didn't have the greatest season this year too. And also obviously Michkov, in terms of just pure talent and production, he should have been up there too, right? For the reasons that he fell, but it wasn't a talent question for sure, as we saw this year.
Yeah, just an absolutely loaded draft that it's not this year. Like there's good players here, but it's not this year. Like that year was like Leo Carlsson was tearing up the SHL. Will Smith had like broken records in the UNTDP. Bedard broke records in the WHL. Adam Fantilli had an outstanding college year. So it was like a lot of, and Michkov had a record-breaking KHL year. So it was like the perfect storm.
Those 4 guys, Karlsson, Fantilli, Smith, and Michkov, we don't want to go too hard into it, but all those guys would be really good contenders for number 2 or even number 1 in this draft, right?
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
So, all right, SJShorky had a second question, which is, what are your thoughts on Tom Willander? Would he be a good fit for the Sharks? The weird part with this question is I don't know what the hell Vancouver wants to do with their team. I never know what Vancouver wants to do with their team. And that's the problem, is it's hard for me to create a realistic trade scenario because I don't know if Vancouver's going up or going down or going sideways, what the hell they want. So I don't know.
Right, but I think Shorky's question to some degree is about the player.
Yes.
And so I did reach out to a scout, actually something that I was going to write a couple weeks ago, but I got busy with the Barracuda stuff, so I didn't write it yet. Maybe I'll still write it, but I asked, at least one scout's opinion is that he does project as a top 4 guy.
Yes.
And so with that being said, then of course any legitimate top 4 defenseman should be on the Sharks' radar. So don't know what it'll cost though. He was the 12th pick of a draft, right?
I think so. Yeah.
And I don't think he's a guy whose stock has really fallen much or anything like that. No. He hasn't upgraded that people think he's going to be a top pairing guy, but top 4 is pretty solid for the 12th pick. If that the ceiling of the top 4 is pretty solid for the 12th pick. And so you would have to trade something kind of equivalent-ish in if it was a 1-for-1. So it might be, it had to be a guy whose draft stock has risen to, like, if you did a redraft, he might go higher. Which might be, then we're talking like Chernyshov with like a 3rd round pick or something like that. Chernyshov, like, it would not be 33 anymore, but I don't know how high he would go in a redraft. He might still be like 15 or 18 or something like that, right? So you got to add that sweetener, right? So I don't know if Mukmadulin or Musty, they quite cut it as a set. Maybe they do too, as centerpieces. But that's what we're talking about. You got to trade something that's like roughly equivalent 1-for-1, and maybe you got to add a sweetener, but you can't be like I'm not saying you're suggesting the Shorky, by the way, but you can't be packaging like, hey, let's throw a 2nd rounder, and we love Colin Graf, but Colin Graf for Willander. That's not going to cut it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like maybe they would be interested in something like a Chernyshov, but I don't think they're going to be interested in Mukmadulin plus some extras.
So. Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I guess they could be in a sense that Mukmadulin is ready to play, kind of, but
it's like unless Tom Willander doesn't want to sign there, and I don't know if that's the case either, then that's something different. Because if it's like he's not going to sign, then that's different.
And the Mukmadulin part too is like, do you believe he is a future AHL top 4 defenseman? I still do. And so why would you just trade one guy who is more ready for another guy who's less ready?
Yeah, other than one is right-handed, and that's it.
Okay, yeah, but who projects about the same in terms of impact, though?
Yeah, that's fair. I think there's a lot more runway with Willander, whereas Mukhamadulin's got to start proving it. So
yeah, but the Sharks kind of need to be better next year a little bit.
Yeah, that's fair.
You can't basically, if you trade Mukhamadullin now, you're doing this the Timo Meier thing where you traded for Mukhamadullin a couple of years ago, and you're like, well, he's a little older, but it'll take a little time, and you're kind of just resetting the clock for that spot on your roster. So
yeah. Speaking of that, Zach Benson went number 13. God, I love Zach Benson. He's had a okay time in Buffalo, but good hockey player. That's Zach Benson. Good draft, that 2023 draft. All right. Our next question comes from Connor, who
you want me to explain it?
No.
This is a complicated one, so.
I'm going to say, why don't NHL drafted players get traded to another team after they've been drafted on the same night as the NHL draft? That's what he's asking.
Right. And we see it a lot in the NBA. If you guys are basketball fans, obviously one of the most famous example might be Kobe Bryant, who was drafted by the Charlotte Hornets and then traded to the LA Lakers on the same night. So anyway, I reached out. I asked about this with the player agent because I was curious. Yep. And he didn't actually have a great answer for it in some ways.
Yeah.
One of the things he said was that one thing that, and this part is a good answer. He said that, well, let me actually look back on it to be sure. But basically, like in his view, like the NHL, they're drafting for a future impact, whereas the NBA is more immediate impact.
Yeah.
Which is relatively true because NBA just have a better sense of what a player will. I'm not exactly sure why, but just like you have a better sense generally of who's going to develop and who's not going to develop in the NBA, as opposed, it's a little less of a crapshoot, basically.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and so like that's so okay. So he says like a smaller roster makes a smaller roster in the NBA too makes it easier to identify a player that might fit. And easier to have another club kind of draft you in that sense. Like they have a better sense, okay, we want this specific guy. But then I asked though, like, well, then why do that in the NBA though, where like, why don't you just trade that pick to the team that is like, why didn't the Charlotte Hornets just trade that pick to the Lakers directly instead of going through that like process of the Hornets drafting Kobe, and I think wearing a Hornets hat at the draft, right? That kind of awkward thing, right? That's kind of thing he was asking about. Like that does happen in NBA where a guy gets drafted by a team, and sometimes he doesn't even know he's gonna get traded. He does interviews for like 15 minutes wearing like, I'm really excited to be a 76er, and then he gets traded 30 minutes later to the Grizzlies.
That's weird. I'm happy this NHL doesn't do that because I would hate that.
That's really awkward. Yeah. So anyway, his answer to this, he wasn't sure. He just said, well, just some leagues have different norms, I guess.
Yeah.
So not much of an answer there. But in terms of the advantage to it, though, yeah, it's hard to kind of figure out what the advantage of that is in terms of, I think the whole idea, of course, is, okay, if you're trading for a specific player or pick, yeah, you kind of know what you want. But yeah, why you don't, like, right before that pick is about to be made, why don't you just trade that pick and select that player yourself? I'm not really sure. That might actually be an NBA question. So maybe there's a reason why, for collective bargaining reasons or whatever, they do that in the NBA. But like Keegan says, though, it is for the best, though. Like, how awkward would that be for the Penguins to draft Sam Dickinson and 30 minutes later, hey, Sam.
Hey, buddy, you've been traded. I think it's just the NHL prefers to trade up to the pick and be like, we're picking this guy after we've traded 3 picks to get him, and be like, there's our guy.
Right, but the NBA short circuits that step by one, but just having the original team pick the player and then trade the player.
Weird. Right. It's super strange. And also, like, the NBA draft is like 2 rounds long, whereas the NHL is 7. So if you don't get your guy, there's another guy on the list right after it, theoretically.
Right. So yeah, that's what the agent was trying to say, that there is sort of more of that. How do you say it? Like, for a specific player, there's less supply out there. So
Yeah.
so that
Would
that
I
does kind
do
of push
that
it.
in like NHL GM modes on I would definitely do that. I do that all the
You
time.
do that?
Yeah. If they're like, wait a minute, you selected that guy? I want that guy. Then I just like slam trade proposals at him and tell him like, that's mine. Anyway, I do that. But it's not the
Right.
norm.
And I guess that could happen too, where like if you pick somebody, we've never really seen that happen, right? You had
Mhm.
one example, but that was
Yeah.
not the exact example. But
Yeah.
like, let's say like you pick, let's say the Sharks pick Macklin Celebrini at number 1, and then teams like Edmonton's like, you know what? We're gonna give you
Okay.
Connor McDavid and our next 3 first-round picks for Macklin Celebrini
Yeah,
after the
exactly.
draft.
The only
But
example I found was Dylan Ferguson in like in the I think it was in the inaugural Vegas draft,
right.
was traded from Vegas to Dallas 2 days after the draft. Don't know why, but he was traded.
All right, are you sure about that? Because he played for Vegas that first year.
Oh, or maybe it went the other way. Maybe he was from Dallas and then was traded.
Yeah, he was drafted by Dallas.
There it is.
Yeah, he was drafted by Dallas,
So it
7th
was,
round, 2017.
and then they traded him to Vegas.
And then they traded him, yeah, like I don't know how many days later, but they traded him with a 2020 second round pick for Mark Mathot. So there's a callback. So
good old Mark Mathot.
oh, right, because I think Mark was actually still like pretty highly regarded back then, and so yeah, but a lot of people thought like he would be Vegas's number 1 defenseman or number like top 4 defenseman for them.
If I remember right, the Sharks have a little bit of interesting history in this too, because I think that Charlie Coyle was drafted and then was traded with the Brent Burns trade, like really pretty recently after. I think.
Let's see. That's a good one. Yeah, so it does happen though, like with the Ferguson thing to some degree. Let's look at this Burns thing though. So I'm looking at Charlie Coyle's hockey reference page. Let's look at the trades. He was traded on June 24th, 2011.
Oh. Okay,
no, that's a year later.
That's
yeah,
a year later.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I got my years mixed up. It was just near the draft. That's why.
But it was around the draft though, so you're thinking.
My brain was thinking, but it's the year.
You're on the right track. You're on the right track.
But that happens like a year later. Teams trade prospects.
I guess it is possible. It's just not something that's not done. Like you just you want a guy, you just trade for the pick to get the guy. Just like the Sharks wanted Logan Couture, they traded for the pick and made a pick themselves, right? But
yeah,
I mean, there's got to be examples of it, maybe more, but it isn't a thing though, right? There are no hockey cards with pictures of I don't know Chris Pronger wearing Chris Pronger was drafted by the Whalers, and so he wore a Whalers cap and jersey. So.
Yep. All right, we have. I'm gonna count 1, 2, 3, 4 questions related to defensemen and how to.
Oh, we're gonna do the defenseman. Okay, right.
This is kind of a big part of the show.
Yeah.
We have some big key linchpin moments, and
basically we talk a lot about defense, and then we have a whole section for the number 2 pick, trading up, trading down,
trading sideways.
Pick. Yeah,
it's also important to note that this is all happening while Gandalf is talking to the Steward of Gondor, and he has just brought Merry across many fields.
Oh, that guy sucked. Yeah, Steward of Gondor. Yeah,
that guy sucks.
Not a fan.
He's very upset right now.
Not a fan.
Gandalf's like, hey, Aragorn's coming. He's like, this is my kingdom. Yeah, that's what's happening right now.
I don't want to give it away, but a Steward of Gondor gets what he deserves at the end of the movie.
Dude gets lit on fire.
He gets it, and he deserves it. He deserves it.
All right. Joshua Carey asks, he's the first one of these. With defense being such a big need, is there any defenseman the Sharks could trade for or look for to sign to an offer sheet this year or next year?
Okay, so we're looking at offer sheet people, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that we had to remind everybody, and some of you guys already know this, but for the Sharks to offer sheet somebody in the range that we're probably looking at, they'll need to reacquire their 2026 third round pick, which they do not have. And so when you do offer sheets, the draft picks that you trade that you have to trade to the team that you're taking the player from, they have to be your own picks. So just a reminder of that. And the Sharks traded their 2026 third to Pittsburgh. And so the Sharks do not have that. They'll have to reacquire that. Yes. And that range of offer sheet is 6.8 to 9.1, basically. So that's going to be a little tough. And actually, 4.5 to 6.8 million, the next tier after the one I just mentioned, that is also you need to trade your third round pick.
Yeah.
So the Sharks are right now are not eligible to do either of those tiers. So anyway,
That makes it tough.
that makes it tough, but you can get the pick back though. Keegan, you had an example of St. Louis doing that last year. It wasn't ridiculous. So
so St. Louis had to reacquire their pick, and they traded down from a third to a fifth to do it. So that's all it kind of took. They basically took their second, they got it back, they gave them a later second, and then also traded from their third to a fifth.
You basically decided to give Pittsburgh a reason to give you back the pick, and it won't be that much. It's like, hey, Pittsburgh, we want a third round pick back. Okay, give us a third round pick in 2027, and as a sweetener, give us a fifth round pick or a fourth round pick another year. So
some sort of pick arrangement seems to be the way to do it, unless the team really wants to screw you, which hopefully they don't.
Right. So anyway, in terms of the RFA kind of defenseman out there, really worth offer sheeting. I don't know if there's anybody that stands out to me. Like Bouchard's a very good offensive player, but we need to offer sheet him. Byram's out there. He's good, but again, you need to offer sheet him. Dobson. I mean, there's players out here, Dobson, but again, when we're talking about a lot of these guys, okay, now we're talking about probably in the 6.8 to 9.1 range. So are you going to trade? And this is what the wall you run into for actually from 4.5 million AAV up, you got to put in your 2026 first round pick. And I know that we had a guest, Steve Warrior. It's a good show. Steve's a good guest, but you're not going to do that. He suggested it. You're not going to do it. You're crazy to do that. So,
yeah, it would have to be a guy that like is projected to be a real stud, like a real stud.
You're basically saying, like, are you willing to trade the chance for Gavin McKenna for no Dobson? No. Right? And if it's like Rasmus Dahlin, I know he's the example I keep using, but like, okay, that's a true blue number one defenseman. Let's talk. But these other guys I mentioned are all very good players, but none of these guys strike me as number one defenseman right now. Luke Hughes is on this list too. So you can kind of have fun with that and try to get Quinn Hughes to San Jose too, but not likely though, obviously, for also too for the fact too that Mike Greer is good friends with Tom Fitzgerald too. So I doubt that would happen, but anyway,
it's tough because also the cap is going up by a shit ton. So a lot of these teams that are like in cap crunches are going to be out of cap crunches. They might get themselves back into it, but like that's part of the reason why offer sheets work is because like the team cannot afford them.
Right. So looking at this year's RFA list though, Bouchard, Luke Hughes, no Dobson, Bowen Byram, Condre Miller. Look at some of the top RFAs. Definitely some good players and players that would help the Sharks, but are you willing to put your 2026 first in the jackpot for it? I seriously doubt it for any of these guys. Let's look at maybe Joshua asked about the next year. So let's see if we can pull that up really just to give a tease at least. And if Puckpedia is right, then we're looking at Simon Edvinsson, Jackson Lacombe. Those are interesting guys. Thomas Harley. That's a good name. Lane Hudson. That'll be a fun one.
Brant Clark, Olin Zellweger.
Yeah, but those guys haven't quite proven themselves yet, though, completely. So I'm going with a little higher end guy, slightly higher end than those guys. Minchikov. But in that one, you're going to then be putting your 2027 first at risk, which maybe you would be willing to do.
Yeah, maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
And I like Lane Hudson. And Lane Hudson is going to be the deserving winner of the Calder. Sorry, Sharks fan. He's going to be deserving winner of the Calder. But is he going to be an all-around number one defenseman? He's not. He's more offensive leaning. And so is that the guy that you want to put your, maybe 2027 you'll feel okay with, but that's a wait and see. You got to see how your team does next year. But anyway, so to answer Joshua's question overall, like those are some of the names, but I don't know if you would do it for any of these names.
Yeah. It's going to be an ongoing question. I don't think offer sheet's the way to go either. I think we're going to need to sign a trade. Offer sheet's just too risky with the way that the Sharks are built and having to get rid of one of these picks that is super, super high.
I think if you can get it in the lower range, right? Like if you get it below the 4.5 range,
Sure.
where from 2.2 to 4.5 AAV, then would you give up your 2026 second round pick? Okay, that's a good pick. That's where you got Chernyshov. But if you can get a team on a cap crunch like the Blues caught the Oilers, okay, that could be worth it to add some good talent along the margins, that a sneaky top four defenseman, a legit top nine forward. Okay, that's worth it. So that might be the range that you're looking at, but that's not a range that's going to get you a legit top four defenseman, though. So in most cases, so.
All right. This next question is also about D. It's interesting because it's more about a trade specific with a trade specific partner, like the Chicago Blackhawks, who have not a plethora, but a good amount of young D men like Alex Vlasic, Artem Levshinov, Kevin
It's
Korchinski.
from Daniel Alvarez. Yeah.
Sorry, it's from Daniel Almaraz.
Yeah. Almaraz. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Almaraz. I apologize. And Sam Renzel. So it's they're missing some forward prospects. We've got forward prospects. They've got some good D. I'd imagine it would take a decent haul to get a guy like Renzel or Korchinski, and we agree. But I think there's an interesting trade partner there. It'd be weird because the two teams are both rebuilding. And that would be an interesting trade. But it's possible if Chicago doesn't get what they want out of this draft, that they feel like they need to trade one of them. But I'm not too sure. I think they're going to get a forward and feel pretty comfy going forward.
Yeah, you thought that of the four young, maybe linchpin Blackhawks defensemen prospects,
Yeah.
Vlasic, who's a proven guy, Levshunov, Renzel, and Korchinski, that Korchinski is actually the one that it might be the most expendable of that group. Vlasic has already signed a long-term deal. Levshunov was the number 2 pick, and Renzel's a guy who's really, his stock has really gone up a lot since he was drafted. I think he was second round pick or a late first, right? But anyway,
I think it was a very late first.
Very late first. But still, so Korchinski is the one that might be the most available.
Mm-hmm.
I know you said you're not the biggest fan of Korchinski, but I guess Sharks fans, we'd ask you, like, is Korchinski the guy that you want? I know that a lot of people liked him in his draft year, but we're 3 years away from that now. And so that might be the guy that you can get. And then what you had to trade for him, I don't think you need to trade like your top prospects. Like maybe that's where you could start to maybe Musty is the most that you give up. Maybe you don't want to give him up, but then you can start going even to the tier below that. Maybe, I don't know, but
yeah, that I don't love or Kevin Korchinski. He just was. I had a couple guys ahead of him that year. Like I think I had Matejchuk ahead of him, even though Matejchuk has some warts and still is developing. But he's still a good player. I had Minchikov ahead of him too. Got taken after.
Oh, good call.
But I think because his stock or he got sent back to the AHL for a lot of this year, it's definitely on the downswing. So if you're trying to get like stock down and trying to get a kind of a cheap asset, I think that's a reasonable get. It's all going to be about those. Do you want to give up your Musties and Chernyshovs and your plethora of good prospects right now? Maybe there's a chance there. If you don't hit on the other stuff, maybe.
You still have to give up a lot, though.
Yeah.
So a great example of this season, obviously, is Juracek. And Juracek's stock has fallen from being the 6th pick of his draft, but you're still not getting him for a song. It's not at that point yet. And so you're still giving up. Minnesota gave up a first round pick. Granted, not the strongest draft this year, but you're still giving him something decent, though. So
so Juracek was the 6th pick in that draft, and Korchinski was the 7th pick. So it's like he's right there with them.
Right. I mean, I don't know if Korchinski's star has fallen maybe as much as Juracek's has, but
I think Korchinski had such a better year originally that people thought he was going to be just a plug and play this year, and then he just stepped back. So tough to say. It's a good thought though, because I hadn't really considered Chicago to be the trade partner just because they're in a rebuild like us and they want all their pieces and prospects. But maybe
Right. Yeah, and actually, I have a couple other teams that I think I was talking with a scout about this, about teams that might
Mhm.
have a plethora of defensemen. So let's get to that in a second. So we're going to answer that in one of these questions coming up. I think we have two more defensive questions here. So
Yes, like Free Slice, who ask, who do we like out of these available, in quotes, which is a good way to put it, D targets? Noah Dobson, Simon Nemec,
mm,
or Brant Clark? I have an answer,
okay,
but it's only because I like this player more than the other two. That's a good way to put it. I like Brant Clark. I've
okay,
always liked Brant Clark. I think he has a certain amount of offensive talent that, like, Dobson obviously put up 70 points last year, so like he can get there, but this year was not the prettiest
hmm
for him. But Clark is young enough that, and I'm seeing a lot of them at lower levels and at points in the NHL, that like you could maybe believe that he could get there one day. Like he has a lot of
okay,
offensive skill. Um, there's problems with him because he's not the fastest and he has never been the quickest, and his defense leaves a lot to be desired. But if you're looking for an offensive right D with a great brain, I
mm,
like Brant Clark a lot. So I
okay.
would try to find him, especially if LA is in the mood of just giving away Brant Clark for some reason.
Well, they're not going to give them away. Let's
Yeah, yeah.
be, but
But I mean, like,
okay. So let me
it's
ask you this: you answered the
interesting
question
because I
the right
never thought he
way.
would be available, and then there's all these things of him being
Well,
available. So
fair, but uh Dobson, Nemec, Clark, let's say the beginning cost is, let's say, Quentin Musty.
mhm.
So you would do it for Clark?
I would do it for all. I would do Quentin Musty for any of them because, like, the
Okay.
Sharks have enough
Okay.
Quentin Musty. It's the Chernyshov. It's
Okay. How about Chernyshov then? A little higher up
yeah.
the draft rankings.
I'd do it for Clark.
Just for Clark?
I do it for probably Clark and Dobson.
Okay.
I think the Dobson one is tough because you're sinking yourself into $8 million, $9 million, whereas
Right. He's
Clark, you don't
older.
have to right now,
Yeah.
so it becomes a little bit less of a nice situation. Um, Whereas if Clark never pans out, you don't have to pay him $9 million. You lost out on Chernyshov, but you don't have to pay him $9 million to also lose out on him. You know,
Okay.
so that one's tough. I
Yeah,
think Nemec is not in the
mhm.
same realm of like,
Right, not as proven, right?
yeah, yeah. Clark's tough though because there's definitely weaknesses with him that have always been
Mm.
there, and you really hope that they're going to overcome, but they might not. So I don't know.
Yeah,
That's tough.
I mean, I don't know if I really love any of these guys because I always like more two-way, more.
Sure.
And if we're gonna go into more of a dimension, I like the more defensive side.
Yes.
So
Clark's got
I,
the offensive tools. It's just the rest of it's
yeah,
not there. It's like an Evan Bouchard, but
right.
different
Okay,
player entirely. But
right. But they can help your team though,
mhm.
and so like Erik Karlsson, right, could still help your team even though he trends obviously way more offensive too. So yeah, I mean, I think they're all pretty close to me. I do remember asking a scout about Dobson earlier in the season, and he just said just exactly what you expect. Like there are a lot of tools there, but he's got to be a lot better defenseman to be a true number one defenseman.
Yeah.
And so if we're not targeting, so I guess that's part of it. Like a lot of these names that you see out there, like yeah, they may end up playing the most minutes on your team, but are they true the number one defenseman that you want to win with?
Yeah.
And there's only I don't know how many of those guys are on the league. There might be like 10 of them or something like
They don't
that.
get traded.
And they usually do not get traded. They don't usually get free agency, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what I would say that, okay, we're going to trade for one of these guys. That's fine. But you've got to be, we'll get this question later. Like, would you trade a number two pick for any of these guys? No, I wouldn't because these guys are not, these guys on a really good team might be your number two defenseman, which is fine. But like, if you think higher of a Michael Misa or something like that, like you don't make that trade, I think.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of see these guys. These guys are talented, but they're gonna be your they're gonna be your maybe number two defenseman at best on your team, which is still valuable, but not a number one.
Our next one comes from Patrick. It's a kind of a long question.
Well, basically sorry for interrupting there. Just sorry. This part I'm going to interrupt Keegan a lot because the one thing I do in my writing is turn a lot into try to write it in as few words as possible. Just like that. So that's sort of what I do on the site all the time. So anyway, basically, like, what's the best pathway to the Sharks upgrading the top four of the blue line? That was basically the germ of the question, right? Because
we talked about offer sheet already. So
we talked about offer sheet. Patrick did ask to any sense of whether the Sharks would look to acquire their third round pick. And we did talk about that. It's not that hard to do if they really want to do it. I just don't know. We just don't know if any of the guys are really worth it. But in terms of the best pathway, though, so this is where I will jump in here with. So a few teams were thrown at me that maybe they are full up on defense. Or they just have kind of a glut. Before I get to that, though, this story might make you laugh. So I did ask another NHL scout this exact question. The exact question I asked was, are there any teams that kind of have a glut of defensemen and they have an underused guy that might be a legit top four guy? And what this scout said was, I'm not telling you, that's for my team. So I told him, this is how I know you're legit, because if you weren't my friend, you might be pushing Nikita Ohotyuk on me as a to throw some misinformation at me. So another scout gave me some answers. So you can judge yourself if you think this scout is kind of feeding me some BS or whatever. But I thought there were good answers here nonetheless, though. So we're sharing with you a little bit. So one name that stood out to me, I don't know what you think, is he said Anaheim. And he said that in his mind, Lacombe that's going to be the power play guy. And so suddenly Zellweger, who I think was up and down this year, is suddenly a guy that may not be as secure. And so he might be a sleeper-ish guy to kind of give your top power play spot to him. Maybe he can grow with your guys. So I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I liked Olen Zellweger. I think he's got lots of skill, lots of talent, aggressive style of play, tiny guy. It's a rebuilding team that's trying to tinker around the edges. Yeah, I could see that.
Okay. Another thing you mentioned
too, but they've already got him
right.
Doing well.
And in your mind, has Lacombe he is their power play guy? It looks like he is their guy now. So
yeah, I mean, you assumed for a while that it was going to be Zellweger just because that's what he's grown up being. But yeah, it seems like he's taken the reins more than. He's also 3 years older, so that helps.
Okay. So my guy didn't necessarily steer me wrong there. Then
no, I mean that makes sense.
Another team that's obvious to you guys is Buffalo, but with Buffalo though, I know everyone talks about Dahlin, Byron, Power, right? So, but let's get away from that. They have 3 other defensemen there. And so is there a guy there that you can find some value in you can maybe find his game in a friendlier situation? Buffalo fans are tough on their players. And one guy that I remember hearing a lot of good things about before, and I didn't like him when I watched him this year, but Mattias Samuelsson, right, is a guy that has had pretty good tape before, and Buffalo gave him a good contract, and he's been disappointing ever since. And I'm not really sure his situation. I don't know if he was injured. I know I watched him this year against the Sharks, and I was not impressed at all by him. But that's a guy that, I mean, this guy is signed forever, actually, which maybe you don't want him. He signed up 29, 30. But like that's the kind of guy that if you believe in the player, you take a chance on him, and you can. Well, in this case, Buffalo will pay you to take him because, yeah. So we get out of the obvious, the triumphant of top Buffalo defenseman. That might be a guy that if you like him, there's a reason why Buffalo gave him a 7-year contract. That you think that in a different situation he can find his way. But Buffalo does have a lot of different guys, I guess. varying
Yeah,
quality.
we get
Obviously,
another
but,
Buffalo
yeah.
question later on too.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, well, yeah. I won't get to the main guys. Well, the main guys I'll get to later. He also mentioned that Montreal seems to have a lot of left-handed defensemen that he thought were competent. So I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. So let's take a look. I didn't get a chance to look this
I
part up
mean,
before.
Hudson, I guess.
Yeah, well, Hudson's not available, but who could be available? I guess, right? So.
They also have what? Logan Mailloux and Caden Gooley, is that right?
You got Struble, Gooley. I can't. The guy whose name I can't say. Arbor. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
Logan
heard
Mailloux
his
is a
name in the
right-handed,
playoffs,
but
but yeah, huh?
Logan Mailloux is a right-handed.
Oh, okay, okay. So I
Um,
assume he's referring to Matheson, Hudson, Struble, Gooley, and Arbor. So
yeah.
I would guess.
Why don't I have to go figure out why my dog is doing that. So I will be right back. If you can't hear it, my
Okay,
dog is whining really, really
I
bad.
could hear it.
So you can, if you want to continue on this
I will
moment,
continue. I
I
will
will be
continue.
right back.
But looking at those 5 Montreal defensemen really quickly. See, Gooley played a regular shift this past year. Strubel's a little more down. Strubel might be a guy. He's younger, 23, so maybe you can find a role for him. Arbor, I think he's more of a enforcer-ish type to some degree, right? But yeah, so it's okay. So there's some guys that are possible. If you see one of these guys being able to maybe outplay being a bottom pairing defenseman, then you could take a chance on one of those guys. Another name that was mentioned, actually JD mentioned it a couple podcasts ago. He mentioned Nick Perbix of the Lightning. Perbix played 14 minutes a night this past season, but he's a guy kind of in the, I think he sounds like in the Jalen Chatfield realm, that he becomes a free agent at a younger age, I believe. Let me double check that on Perbix, but I do believe Perbix is slightly younger. I'm gonna double check that. Nick Perbix. All right, you know what? I should just search for Nick Perbix. That's why you have two people doing these shows, so you can help each other. Yeah, Nick Perbix is 26.
Right.
So
We fixed the problem.
What's everything okay?
Yeah, it's just Anna's in the shower, and then the dog is alone.
Oh, okay.
She's just in her kennel, freaking out. She's fine.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
Are
so
we
I
ready
kind of
to
run through some options here. So I think I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. I don't know. He also mentioned Korczak of Vegas maybe having some game. I don't know. So
I do like Korczak.
Okay.
But he's like 27, right? I think he's a little older, but he just hasn't really, because Vegas has a great defense, hasn't like stuck with him. No, he's 24.
But that is the kind of guy to look for, though. That yeah, not in those spots for a guy like that, and maybe he's got a little more talent than his usage has shown so far.
Yeah,
and maybe in a more ice time, he can really blossom.
Yeah, for sure. They have to they have Nick Hague, who's going to be an RFA as well. So he's been always a steady 18 minute night a guy, but maybe there's a little bit there too.
Okay.
Who's a first rounder as well? One of the few Vegas first rounder that actually plays for Vegas.
I thought Nicholas Hague was a second rounder.
Sorry, he was a second round. He just had he was the 34th, so he was right after.
Yeah. I remember because I was still covering Vegas when they drafted him.
Yeah.
So
you remember.
So.
All right, next
one.
Nick
Hague's a guy that I would think they would sign, though, right? So
probably.
Want to,
yeah, but it's like Hague is the reason why Korczak doesn't get a job, kind of thing.
And Vegas is a classic one. Like whenever we've done these, like how to improve the Sharks' defense every summer, we always look at Vegas because they always seem like they have too many defensemen. So I think I've written about White Cloud, maybe looking at him like, hey, maybe he can be a guy that can excel in a larger role. Hey, another guy, maybe Korczak, right? So yeah,
for sure. Yeah, they always have like a good, solid top 4 plus extras that are decent.
Yeah,
so it's a factory out there.
Is Caden Korczak, is he an RFA, I assume?
No, he's still got a year left, so he's going to be
okay.
just under contract.
Okay.
Peg is the only one they got to sign.
Okay.
It's an interesting one, though.
Peg is a good, it's a good one. Yeah, go ahead.
Celebeauty asks, are there any 2025 NHL draft prospects with snarl?
Oh, okay. So we're out of the
D.
The phantom zone of improving the Sharks' defense.
Kind of. We have another part where we talk about the number 2 overall pick, which touches on the defense heavily. But...
Or if you want to do a Lord of the Rings reference, that swamp that you fall into on the way to Mordor, which is a bunch of dead people. I don't remember.
You can't get out of it. Yeah, so. Yeah, you can't get out of the swamp.
But this is a question for you, Keegan.
Yes, Kayshawn Aitchison, which you talked about in your question, Celebeauty, is a great one. He hits like a truck. He likes to shoot the puck. He plays old-time hockey. I like Kayshawn Aitchison. I think he's going to have a fun role in the NHL. How far that's going to take him, we'll see. But there are definite there's a fun factor with Kayshawn Aitchison. Brady Martin's the one that's very popular these days. Brady Martin also hits very, very well. There was some NHL scout pundit person who was like, he hits better than a lot of NHLers do right now.
Right, told Cam Robinson that, right?
Yeah. So he's a great one as well. I think the Sharks might be in a position to get a Brady Martin if they trade it up into like the 10s, unless Brady Martin goes super high. But
well, that's tough though, right? Yeah, trading to the 10s. But how about is it Aitchison or Aitchison?
Yeah, I love Aitchison. He's a defender.
Is he late first, maybe? The Dallas pick?
I think he's going to be gone before the Dallas pick. I think he'll be in the teens, probably like 13 to 15 to 17, just because he's got a lot of physical tools. He's fun. He shoots. He's a great scorer. And in a draft where like the fun factor starts to disappear real hard, and he's a defender that hits like that, people are going to like him, and somebody will take him early. So he did trade up to get him. He's also he's a lefty as well. Not that it matters, but like it seems like every time the Sharks find a possibility, it's like, oh well, he's a lefty, so add another lefty onto the pile, which is fine. You still need both sides, but
so Martin and Aitchison seem like maybe long shots with the Sharks, right? So
yeah, unless they trade it around.
Right. Anybody else?
Let me look down the list and see.
Yeah, like lower, maybe use a second rounder to get him.
Yeah, use a one of the further down picks or their Dallas pick to get him. Not really in that range. Not that I could see right now. I was going to answer with Brady Martin. That was going to be my pick. Horkoff? Maybe Horkoff. He's in like the 50s, 60s.
Is he the son of Sean Horkoff?
He is the son of Sean Horkoff.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, big guy. Got some skill. He's got decent snarl to him.
Sean Horkoff, also a former teammate of Mike Rear.
Hey, that's a good shout then, because you never know.
Yeah.
He's an NTDP kid, which is also something that the Sharks, not that they typically draft from, but they have in the past taken from the NTDP. So, and college and everything. So, yeah, I think that would be another answer as well.
I like this line from Celebeauty though. Celebeauty. I love Smith, Mack, and Eki, but I worry that they are too nice.
I don't think Sully's is too nice.
Yeah, I think you're gonna see some nastiness with Celebrini. I think he's got a little of kind of that McKinnon in him, but
yeah, a little bit of like angry Crosby.
And actually, Macklin is a little bit of a pest too. But anyway, so neither here nor there. So,
all right, next one is from Steven. Steven asks, if the Sharks knew that Blackwood's success would continue, do you think they would still make the Askarov trade?
Yes, I think this is a good question.
Yeah.
A lot of what ifs here, but
yeah, like do we just keep the first and the and Edstrom and just signed Blackwood to a 5x5 or 5-way, whatever?
I mean, granted, again, though, the 2025 first, as we get closer to it, the Vegas is picked, not the greatest pick,
Yeah,
but
that's
still
fair.
a first.
Still first.
Edstrom would be in that competition to be the next Sharks 3C with Beasted and Ostapchuk. And I want to add, this is a little bit of a side. No one asked this question, but like if you watch AHL playoffs, if you ruled out Beasted as being a Sharks future 3C just because they traded for Ostapchuk, that doesn't make any sense. So I think it's more about adding more guys with the possibility of doing such an important job. And so Beasted's still in the mix. Ostapchuk is still in the mix, even though he didn't show a ton of offense this go around with the Sharks and the Barracuda. But just wanted as a reminder of that yeah, I thought people were way too quick to see the Ostapchuk trade as a signal that management was unhappy with Beasted. I that's not how I saw it back then,
Sure.
and I don't see that right now either. But anyway, though,
Great
to
question.
answer, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a good one, huh? Yeah.
I don't think so. I think I would say just you want to grow with a goaltender in this way that the curve of when Blackwood's going to be very good is in the next 2 or 3 years, and the Sharks are not going to be good in the next 2 or 3 years. And I still don't think there's enough there to say that like it's easier, but I don't think it solves the issue. Whereas Askarov, you could solve it for a long time, like a really long time.
Yeah, I actually disagree with you here. I think that, and this is not like from the Sharks because it's
Sure.
hard to talk with the current Sharks management about such a kind of a hypothetical that's as far out as this, right? But I would say that it would make a lot of sense to hold on to that first in Edstrom and use them for exactly look the same thing. The franchise needs the same thing, has needed the same thing for the last couple of years. Once you drafted Celebrini, everyone looked at the defense. And yeah, goaltending is a question, but I am more on the side of you don't necessarily need your Connor Hellebuck, your guy that your 10 by 10 or sorry, your 8 by 10, 8 by 12 million goaltender to win games. You can do it. You can do it the Vegas way. You can do it the Washington way. You can do it other ways. And that's kind of what I subscribe to. If you happen to draft that guy, that's great. But to trade for him, especially if you have that kind of the bird in the hand with Blackwood right now, and that's not I like the Blackwood trade. I'm sorry, the Ashcroft trade when they made it, but now Blackwood has put up another good year that you can argue with me on it. I guess there's an argument for just keeping those assets and then putting them toward a defenseman that you need.
Yeah, that's a good point too. You got more assets for the thing that you really need. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's an easy answer for that one.
This is another one to chalk up to or add to the list of things to ask my career in 2 decades. So
Yeah, or the three-headed monster and see where we come out.
yeah,
With
exactly.
JD.
Yeah, that's actually a fun one. Yeah, that would have been a fun one to go over.
Here's an interesting tidbit, and it's only from the extended edition. Did you know that Pippin's like, he's got the Citadel armor, like the little crest that he gets when he joins Gondor, and they give him like a little uniform. There's a scene where Faramir comes in and says, "Hey, that was mine when I was a child. That was his.
No.
That was his. That was his armor."
Like I'm fairly certain that I put on the extended edition on background before, but I've never sat down and watched it though because honestly, the Return of the King. The reason, if you guys don't know what we're doing here, we're just doing a bit where we're gonna see if our podcast is longer than the Return of the King extended edition.
And so I'm just updating on where we are in the story. And Faramir just mentioned to Pippin that that was his armor as a boy, which I think is cute.
Return of the King is definitely my least favorite of the
Really?
initial. Yeah, because it was already too long, the original. And if you guys have watched it, I thought the movie ended like
long.
5 times and kept going.
I honestly also hot take. I've watched all the extended editions. I don't like the extended editions. I think they kind of like ruin the movies in some ways. Like they take out your emotion from it so much Like there's just these scenes where you're like, why is this in here? I don't need it.
Fellowship of the Ring is, I think, one of the best blockbuster whatever movies ever. That movie is not the extended edition. That the theatrical cut is like no notes good. I think I really love that movie. So anyway, that's the bit that we're doing. So every once in a while we'll tell you
if you're
about
confused,
Gondor.
I'm going to tell you all about Lord of the Rings in the background and
Saruman and
oh man. Miguel Lenhart says sign Matt Duchene.
Okay.
It's longer than that. But would you say he would sign to a 2-year, $8 million AAV with us? Damn.
Okay, so my argument against this, though, is that Matt has already taken a contract less than he's worth to try to win a Stanley Cup. So I'm not seeing that unless maybe he wins with Dallas this year, and then he kind of thinks like, okay. So I don't think Matt Duchene does not want a Stanley Cup, and so that would be my. He is a good candidate. So, and you're right that he's sort of the least mentioned. Obviously, we talk a lot about Marner's, a UFA, Ehlers, right? The biggest names out there. I've mentioned Granlund and Tavares, and we haven't really mentioned Duchene. And Duchene is, I did say this, I think, a couple weeks ago, that Duchene is sneaky, the best contract in the league this past year. I think he put up 80 points, and he was making $3 million. But again, that $3 million is him taking a cut to go to Dallas to try to win a Stanley Cup. And so doesn't mean that that's impossible. He's not the worst idea. So yeah. So of course you don't hate it. I mean, you need a guy like that for sure. I think that what the Sharks are looking for is a guy that's willing to teach, be a mentor, and who is still a point per game or close to that kind of player, right? So I think Tavares and Granlund still make that cut, even if Duchene's been more productive this year, and is willing to lose, grin and bear it, and teach the kids a bit.
Rothgar asks, are there any top Euro free agents that the Sharks could sign? Because the prior regimes would do something similar and try and add some talent for free from across the pond. And
that's one thing that we should say, that I think as we look back at the Doug Wilson regime, and we have criticized a lot about the end of it, and fairly so. But one thing that they did do well on a consistent basis is find guys from Europe that maybe they just give you a year or two. Like Schmidt gave the Sharks one good year. Marcus Sorensen gave the Sharks one good year. Donskoy actually ended up being a pretty good player for a few years. I know Melker wasn't the most popular Shark, but he gave the Sharks a few good years too. So they did a good job of that, and that dried up, but they did a good job of that over the years for sure. But to answer your question, though, in terms of free agents this year, we both checked around on this, and it seems like this class of European free agents isn't the strongest. Corey Prodman wrote an article about that, if you want to look back in February. But even in that article, he mentioned the defenseman that the Oilers actually ended up signing, which I didn't realize at first, but it was Atro Lepinen. I sorry if I'm saying his name wrong, but he was number 3 on Prodman's list, so pretty high up there. He put up, what'd you say, 63 points?
Yeah, 63 points in 60 games in Liga.
Yeah, he's what, 26?
Yeah, and he was 26.
I asked somebody I trust, like, do you see this guy as a future NHL guy, impact guy? He's like, nah. So that's number 3 on your list. So this may not be the year for it, especially at defense, which the Sharks need the most, right? There were a couple names, though, that I did get something on that was interesting. So the Sharks might need some goaltender for the AHL if you let Romanov walk, and you can keep Carey or not. He can be your you also have Matt Davis too, so maybe let Carey or walk. I don't know, but he did mention I don't know if I'm saying his name right, Moldegren.
I don't know.
Let me look up his first. I think it's Ilya Moldegren. And I'm sure I'm saying Maxime. Sorry about Maxime Moldegren. I'm sure I'm saying his last name wrong, so I apologize for that. But just learned about him today. I didn't know too much about him, but he is 22. He is undersized. He's 6'1", so that's a strike against him. But he just led Dynamo past I think it's a team that wants to sign Podorowski, right? Scott. No, that's not. No, that's that's avant-garde. But anyway, so Scott we know is a traditional power, KHL power. So anyway, so this guy is interesting, and this scout, this is a Russian NHL scout too. I'll add, thinks that that this guy does have NHL starter potential, maybe a long shot, but so this guy might be interesting signing, even if his height will probably scare some teams off there. But that's an interesting one that was brought up to me. He also brought up Shabanov, who I have heard. I think Hockey News Hub, very connected with Russian hockey, has connected that name.
Guy, right?
He's tiny guy though, yeah. Has connected him to the Golden Knights, and Hockey News Hub has seemed pretty accurate on stuff in terms of just he reads Russian news reports, I believe, and he can translate it over. So he's done a good job with that. And so he's also 5'8" though. So I don't think that doesn't sound like a Mike Greer target. A 5'8" winger.
Yeah.
So
2 names in this list that are interesting to me. Number 14, Noah Beck, which the Sharks signed Noah Beck.
Yep.
Well, the Barracuda did, right?
No, he signed it with the Sharks.
It was? Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, for next year. But he's older, so it's a 1-year contract next year. So it's going to be, I'm sure they'll give him a lot of looks in a Barracuda. And
he was number
a swim season for him.
He was number 14 on this list. And then Oscar Steen was number 18. And Oscar Steen, I've watched as a Providence Bruin. I've confirmed that. He just went back to the SHL this year and had a good year. So I guess he's on this list to maybe come back. He's a decent tweener guy. Like, did okay in the NHL for a little bit. Did okay in the AHL. He's 27. If you needed a body, maybe you'd get him if you wanted to come back.
Yeah, but he'd be like a 4th liner or something.
Yeah, he'd be like a 4th, 13th forward, something like that.
So, Rothbard, to answer your question.
Not a lot.
Yeah, to quote Rick Pitino, Larry Bird isn't walking the door. Bill Russell's not walking the door. Not from Europe, at least.
Not from Europe. We'll have to find him another way. All right. They're about to sacrifice all of their troops against the Osgiliath, where they just run out in their stupid horses and get shot with a bunch of arrows, which is the dumbest scene. I hate the scene so much. Why is he just getting? They're just gonna get killed with a bunch of arrows, and the guy eats the tomato the whole time. It's a good scene, but anyway. It's time for Chris R's 2 questions.
I did find out the lagoon with the dead people is the Dead Marshes. So
the Dead Marshes. There you go. It's like Dead Marsh, like Adam Dead Marsh.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, that's a good one. Yeah, that was my favorite player.
Really?
One of them. Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. You always get those players that just like you hear about and they stick in your brain. You know, like Maxim Afenagenov, and I was like,
they got great names, right? Yeah.
Maxim Afenagenov. What a damn name. Anyway, Chris R asks, let's say Greer makes 2 trades. What are your 2 dream trades?
Realistic trades, right?
Yeah, I guess, it's a dream, but you're awake. It's a waking dream. That is a great question. Do you have any off the top while I think about it?
Oh boy.
If neither of us have one.
that's one that I didn't think long and hard enough about this one, but
yeah.
I mean, obviously, it would help the defense. Let's say that Buffalo would break up those 3 defensemen.
Sure.
They're not trading Dahlin, so get that out of your head.
Sure.
I would actually take Byram over Power. Now, we'll talk about that in a second, because I think you would take Power over Byram.
Probably.
So we'll talk about that. But let's say it's Byram, and for what would makes sense for them? I mean, I don't know, because Buffalo wants the window. I don't know if that's because they're bringing back Adams, I think, right, for another year. So basically, he's got to make something out of this team. So maybe that's not realistic then. Actually, because I think that they trade one of those guys. It's with the eye of making the team better. Okay, I'm gonna say this one may not be super realistic, but like, let's say it's Byram, and you take on Samuelson's contract, because that does help Buffalo win now. And you got to be sure. You got to do your due diligence on Mattias Samuelsson, because Well, I know Buffalo fans hate him. That I do know from Twitter. And I know I
Yeah.
didn't like watching him this year either. But I also know that he was given a 7-year contract, and maybe there's a good reason for that. And maybe there's a player in there if he
Yeah.
gets out of Buffalo. So maybe something like that. And then you give him like one good asset. You give him like a Musty, or you give him, yeah, you got to give them something that they can show to their fans a little bit. I think there is a little bit of that with Buffalo, the pressure that they're under. So if you just give them the Dallas pick, I don't think that's enough. So you give them the local boy in Musty, and for the Sharks, you have definitely improved your defense with Byram, and you're definitely taking a chance on Samuelson. And you might have to buy out Samuelson at the end of next year if he's still crappy. But anyway.
Okay. So one of them is acquiring a defenseman from Buffalo.
Okay. What
All
about for
right.
you?
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Okay.
I kind of want to like swing for a random superstar, like a random, not random, but like a guy who signed to a deal at a team that's not really going anywhere, you know, like, and that maybe you could get him for not cheaper, but like less than you would have to pay him because he's already under a long-term deal. Like if Nashville decides to randomly try to rebuild instead of trying to continue with this core or whatever, but that would be crazy because they just signed Stamkos and Marchessault and all that.
Yeah, and Shea.
But if they really don't think it's working next year and they want to try and tear this thing down in the middle of the season, then try and grab Philip Forsberg from them. I would love that. Like he's 30, yes, he's older, but he's still a productive, very productive first line winger that I think would complement the Sharks' current forward group.
This is more dream than realistic, though.
Yeah. It's a dream, but I'm awake. There's some awakeness to it. It's really tough. I think the biggest dream that I want is them to acquire somebody like Nemec, Brent Clark, maybe Dobson. I'm still not sold on Dobson entirely.
You might be right.
I think that's the ultimate dream is getting one of those top 4 defensemen projected in the future. So I don't know which one to pick. I'm going to go with Brent Clark because I like Brent Clark a lot.
Okay. I think it might be Nemec, though, because
Nemec is the easiest.
It's proven, and they do have a lot of guys.
Yeah.
And they got to clear space for Quinn Hughes, too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that might be the most realistic. The Buffalo idea I just floated seems kind of crazy because I don't know. I don't know enough about Mattias Samuelson to be like, I want to take on that contract till 2030. But if somehow, though, he is the Samuelson that Buffalo signed, and you have Bo and Byram, you suddenly added 2 top 4 defensemen who are in a happier place than Buffalo, and that might be something that at least accelerates your rocket ship out of last place.
Yes, which is what the Sharks need. They need to not be last place. You could also try and get Keandre Miller. I really like Keandre Miller as well.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that, though. Rising cap. I know the Rangers like him, so...
Yeah, you'd have to pry him away somehow.
Yeah.
Or Braden Schneider or Zach Jones, but they're not like solid guys. They're just kind of... You're just hoping at that point.
Right.
Like Braden Schneider is fine, but Zach Jones is kind of a hope.
So maybe then I would say then dream realistic is maybe being able to turn that Dallas pick into the centerpiece for Nemec, I guess. Something like that. Maybe.
That's a good way to put that.
Yeah. Though that Dallas pick's going to be weak, though, but I don't know. All right.
We'll figure it out. Add more pieces to it. Or Nemec releases an article that he's super unhappy and needs to be traded. That's all it takes is the agent going, fuck this. I'm not getting playing time.
You know, a Lakers fan, Eri Hope, for all you Lakers haters, is always reports of, okay, Giannis wants out of Milwaukee. And then the next day, he only wants to go to the Knicks, the Lakers, or
Yeah.
That's the only way you can get a guy like that, because you can't offer Milwaukee the best package for a guy like that. So in this case, yeah, that's what you want out of Nemec. I guess you want him to somehow, but that doesn't happen in NHL. The players don't force their way onto
Yeah.
specific teams usually. You need Lane Hudson though to force his way out of Montreal because he wants to play with Macklin.
You know who I really like as a player that will never be traded, probably not recent, not soon, is Martin Feravari from Washington. He's just such a, I don't know. He's got a lot of well-rounded attributes to him, and he makes so little money for what he does and brings on the ice. Like, he's like a $2.5 million contract. Man, Washington does some good stuff, but he's not like a dream scenario. He's just like that's a guy you add in that's going to help you win games kind of thing. So I like
Vegas does it really well too. I know
Vegas
everyone hates Vegas, but Vegas, man, like
they do.
The forwards, like if Vegas picks you up off of waivers as a forward, like you have like at least a 33% chance of signing a multi-year, double-figure, 8-figure contract within a couple years of them picking you up from waivers. Like Chandler Stevenson, I don't know if Howden was waivers, but he was pretty down there though, right? So their
whole bottom like 9 is like Barbashev, Nicholas Roy.
Nicholas Roy's another one. Yeah, that wasn't really
Brett Howden, Riley Smith, Dorothea, Brandon Saad, Keegan Cole is hey, that's the best Keegan in the NHL. The only Keegan in the NHL. They have just like a bunch of dudes that are really good.
They have a gift of that. And that's something to do with like their pro scouting or their development, but they just find guys. So.
They really do. Their bottom sixes end up being decent and not expensive.
And I was wrong too. I thought that they might drop off a little bit because I didn't really like Olofsson that much, right? Like because this past off season they really went budget on their wings and they figured it out. So yeah, I was wrong on that.
All right, Chris R has a second question, which is: would Ferraro take a pay cut to stay in San Jose?
Right, and I think this one's a quick one to answer. I think probably not. Like, why? Granted, I guess the only reason that he might do it is because the market tells him that he is a bottom pairing defenseman, and so he might get like high end bottom pairing money, whatever that is, with the rising cap. But that might be like 2.5, or that might be like maybe $3 million about where he's making now. But so I guess it's possible. But that is. If he does that, though, that's not a bargain, though, because that's the league telling you that he's not a top 4 defenseman. If he was regarded league-wide as a top 4 defenseman, he's going to be making $6-7 million during next free agency. But I don't see that. So I guess to answer your question is, yeah, maybe yes, because just the market won't be that strong for him, and the Sharks can afford to have a $3 million bottom pairing defenseman that is great in the room, et cetera, right?
So we have, while Aragorn is being gifted the rebuilt Shards of Narsil blade that cut off Sauron's fingers, he's being gifted it from shit. What's his name? Damn it, the elf.
Legolas?
No, the other elf, the big elf, the
big elf. Oh, Hugo Weaver.
Yeah, the guy from the Matrix.
Hugo Weaving.
The guy from the Matrix.
I don't know.
Agent Smith. He's being gifted.
It doesn't matter.
Damn it! How could I not get this?
This is how we're gonna make to the end of the extended edition, right?
Hold on.
Struggling to make Return of the King references.
No, my brain is failing me. How do I not know his name? It's like
Elrond. It's Elrond. Oh my god! Can't believe I beat you to it. So of course I'm wearing a Superman.
All right, he just got gifted the sword, and now he has to go into the cave and fight the ghosts in the cave. Anyway.